Josh here. We're going to talk about fulfillment and logistics today. It's an important part of your internationalization strategy. Whatever plan you have in place for shipping and warehousing domestically should be revisited, potentially revamped entirely for international. Let's talk about what logistics means and what your options are in terms of warehousing and shipping. Fulfillment and logistics are often referred to as shipping, which isn't entirely wrong, especially for domestic sales, but way too simplistic when we're talking about international sales. Fulfillment and logistics, or your process of shipping goods, also include elements such as warehousing, insurance, multimodal shipping, duties and taxes, returns, and much more. The good news is that whether you're shipping beer, clothes, or event boats, the timing could not be better to move your products internationally. E-commerce is on the rise, and the growing integration of technology to leverage excess capacity on containers and throughout multi-modes of transportation have helped make global shipping costs more affordable. For example, my friend Foley talks about in his book on entrepreneurship how a bottle of Heineken from Holland to Hong Kong now costs only 1 or 2 cents a bottle. That's how much recent logistics innovations have helped lower the cost of international shipping. However, granted, costs per unit depend on how many units at a time, right? And in the new e-commerce direct-to-consumer world, you might start out shipping 1 unit at a time to a consumer. And you need to determine at what point your sales are stable enough to warrant shipping larger quantities to a location closer to your consumer and then packing those items direct for an individual at that point from that location. So this is all part of the equation and plays into your answers for where am I shipping my products from? It's one thing if your business is small enough to then still stockpile your goods in your living room, but most of you will rely on warehousing to store your inventory if you want to keep a healthy relationship with those you love in your home. I have made that mistake before, and I apologize again to my wonderful wife. So, now, shipping your goods internationally from a domestic warehouse entails higher costs and longer wait times, obviously. However, while keeping an inventory in another country will help you cut shipping costs and times, you are committing your inventory to a region, which means you're pulling it from your global inventory. This is a natural progression of many businesses, but you need to determine your risk tolerance if demand suddenly slows down. Also, using local carriers without having feet on the ground could mean you're losing sight and control over your logistics system. Why does that matter? Out of sight, out of mind. Restful nights until you find your customers are not getting the goods that they need in time, or the packages are arriving crushed, or overall experiences are miserable. And if you're not using a global partner, you'll need to deal with different regulations and potential language barriers, cultural differences, tax liabilities, and more. So which one should you choose? That mostly depends on your capabilities and the expectations of your consumer. Now, when I say your capabilities, I don't mean you, yourself, your company, but perhaps a 3PL that you're choosing from. And I'll explain more about that later on in the module. But first, I want to provide an overview on warehousing. Traditionally, companies using an international warehouse would decide on the location depending on where most of their international customers are. But here are 2 examples where that may not be the most advantageous, and I'm going to demonstrate those now. So 1, as mentioned briefly earlier, you're talking about leveraging FTZs, free trade zones. Right? For example, there are major advantages with placing product in countries that offer free trade zone options, especially if your products require in-country registration or animal testing, which can be a non-starter for many of us. Or your products require in-country organic packaging. These are issues that you face if selling to a wholesaler or distributor in countries like China or many other regions across the globe. But in many cases, if you place your products in bulk in a free trade zone closer to or within your target market, you can pull it out only when an individual consumer purchases the item, thus bypassing many country-specific certifications and labeling requirements. And this can be useful even in scenarios where you have an in-country distributor, because they can still house their inventory in a free trade zone and only pull it out upon purchase. They can also work with your 3PL or have their own 3PL do the pick and pack out of the FTZ and then deliver direct to consumer. Now, example 2. Leveraging existing regional logistics ecosystems. For example, most of your consumers might be located in France, but that may not be the best location to place your inventory. If you're going to be selling throughout Europe, you might consider places like the Netherlands, with its access to ports, its connection to EU, and favorable VAT compliance structure. Geography and port infrastructure aside, let me break down that VAT advantage for you. Your net VAT advantages, and this is very important here, when you're shipping throughout the EU through the Netherlands, are not different than if you're selling from a warehouse elsewhere in the EU, such as Germany, and you conduct fulfillment through Germany. The difference is that because the Netherlands has placed logistics and fulfillment as a key pillar of their economy, they've created a mature and innovative system to make your life easier, which is ultimately what we want. For example, at least at the time of this video, you do not need to pay your VAT up front if placing inventory into the Netherlands if you're selling onward to another distributor or wholesaler. The VAT liability passes to the wholesaler partner, who then pays it upon selling it to the end consumer. That reduces your paperwork and improves your cash flow by not locking up your VAT payments while your products are working their way through the sales channel. 3. Avoiding unrest. If your consumers are in China, you might think, I'm going to place my inventory in Hong Kong. But recent international events like civil unrest, political instability, or maybe even a pandemic have shown that physical proximity is no longer the only criteria you should consider when you're determining where to place your inventory. What are your plans if the warehouse where your products are located goes into lockdown? What will happen to your business in the area or elsewhere if you lose access to your own products? A lot of companies are now looking for less centralized warehouse solutions to adopt to a more diversified fulfillment strategy that helps mitigate these risks. Another aspect to consider is your storage requirements. You need to make a detailed sales projection and know all of the details of your products, like their size, the shelf life, how they can be stored, for example, on shelves, in bottles or pallets, and in boxes, refrigerated. This way, you make sure the warehouse has the right equipment and storage capabilities to stock and retrieve your goods, and that they have enough flexibility to allow for more space as you grow. Shipping. Now, you have the perfect warehouse, well located, with the right experienced staff, and you understand the process and the management of the logistics. Maybe even you have your nice logo on the door. You now need a shipping strategy. Even with international warehouses, it's possible you still have to deal with international shipping. Thanks to the European Union, it's now a lot easier to ship within Europe, but a product leaving your warehouse in France bound to Russia still needs to go through the whole international shipping system. So here's an overview of what you might need to know. There are basically two different types of shipping methods, door to door. For example, you sell shoes. A container is delivered to your warehouse by a truck. Your staff loads your shoes into the container as they see fit. So let's say 50 boxes, 20 pairs, maybe 100 shoes. The truck leaves your warehouse with a container and delivers it to the freight rail line, where it is placed on a carriage. The train transports your container to, let's say, Los Angeles, where it's then loaded onto a ship. At this point, an inspector could open your container, but that will be the first time it's been tampered with since it's left your warehouse. The ship then takes your container across the ocean to a destination market. At this point of the journey, your shipment depends on whom you're selling your products to, either to another reseller, wholesaler, distributor, or direct to a consumer, and that would be called a last mile delivery, port to port. What if you're a small company selling earrings? Even if it's possible to fill only half or even part of your container, it's still way too big for the volumes of your goods. In such cases, businesses will often rely on a port-to-port solution. As with door-to-door, port-to-port guarantees that your products are being delivered from one port to another in another type of container. These are called LCLs, or less than container load shipments. In LCL shipments, goods from one shipper are combined with goods from another shipper into a consolidated freight. This consolidation can be done by a forwarder, a consolidator, or a carrier. In any case, you will need to rely on partnerships. Most of the time, you'll find a third party that will handle this for you. But LCLs are less cost effective and they don't offer the same protection against damage and theft. But they're still desirable compared to the third option, non-containerized cargo or break bulk cargo. Non-containerized cargo or break bulk cargo are also called RoRos, or roll-on, roll-off shipments. They're used for shipping goods that can't be transported by containers. I don't think most of you are going to be dealing with this because of the e-commerce scenario we're talking about, but here's a quick explanation. Now, in this case, the cargo must be sent in break bulk for sea transport or individual shipments for air or land transport in specialized vessels. In this case, it's more for bulk liquids or massive goods like automobiles, for example. Now, look, these solutions are all designed to help exporters ship in large volumes. If you're only shipping a handful of orders a day, it's likely too soon to consider outsourcing order fulfillment. At this stage, you can still manage it from in-house. However, once you hit about 5 to 10 shipments a day, that's when it's time to begin your search for a complete solution. A quick note, even though ocean vessels are more traditionally used for international shipments, more and more airlines are now offering these services too, especially given the excess capacity we're experiencing today. So it's up to you to decide if the cost for air freight is worth it given the consumer expectations and the speed to market. Now, as a side note, it's up to you to make sure you have the proper insurance in place. In case of danger, such as a storm, a vessel operator has the right to sacrifice your property. Such an act is called a general average act. And don't think that because your shoes were untouched, you don't have to pay the bill. The steamship line has the right to spread the cost of expenses across the payload on board, including yours. That is why you need to always have the proper shipping insurance in place in case of these unexpected expenses. So we've covered the basic types of shipping methods. Now, pour yourself a glass of anything that makes you relaxed and keen to dive into the next video on documentation. We'll see you soon. Fulfillment and logistics.